Welcome to Going Virtual, a basic guide to take your events online. Just a reminder, your mic has been placed on mute. We are asking for the purposes of today, because we have so many participants, if you can go ahead and use the chat feature to engage and ask questions, and we have that moderated during the entire session. It is up to you if you'd like to turn your camera off, but it does help with bandwidth, and since so many people are on the call, that is okay, and it also avoids any poor Jennifer situations. We are recording this session so that if you have to drop off, we will make it available as soon as possible after the broadcast has ended. And the other thing we ask is that you be respectful. Shayna, myself, and Rebecca are doing this out of the kindness of our own hearts, just because we feel we want to share what we know with the rest of the industry. We are not experts. We are not paid endorsers or anything like that. So if you have something to say, try to keep it kind. And with that, Shayna, take it away.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Shayna Moskowitz. I am a meeting and event director with Part 2 Events. We are a boutique meeting and event management company, and I've been with the company for about a year. And before Part 2 Events, I was at the Association of American Medical Colleges for about 6 years. And I am located in Silver Spring, Maryland. Been home for about 6 weeks now with my husband and our very energetic and active 2-year-old.
Shayna, there we go.
There we go.
the dangers of doing live broadcasts. Hey, I'm Darryl Diamond, and I own Big White Dog Events. I also produce the Miracle Workers podcast. I've been a meeting planner for about 15 years, with a lot of that in the medical meetings field. And I've been running webinars and virtual events pretty much all of that time, on and off. So I hope that I can be of some help on today's broadcast. I am currently sequestered here in lovely Albany, Maryland, and we hope we can avoid some rain down here today.
Thank you. And we also want to give a big shout out to Rebecca Kane from the U.S. Grains Council, who started the conversation on the National Meeting Planner Facebook group that led to this session. And we also thank her for moderating today's chat and Q&A. So as part of your registration for this webinar, we asked you what you wanted to learn from the session. And one of the responses really stuck with me as we were beginning to prepare for the session. One person wrote, "How can you justify to your attendees that they will get the same experience online as they would in person?" And our answer is they will not. We can create some really important and meaningful experiences, but they will not be the same as your face-to-face events. And you need to know that going into the process. But because they are not going to be the same, we really believe that they will not replace your face-to-face events, and things will go back to some semblance of normal. And we hope that out of this, everybody can learn about the values of virtual events and how to add them to your full suite of offerings for your attendees, your clients, your members, whomever it might be that you work with. Darryl, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, yes, I got it. I'm on 6 different screens. This is why you need help. You need help running a webinar. So rule number 1 on this webinar today, guys, is don't ask which platform should I use or how much should I charge. Look, we can't tackle these things for you. These are individual decisions and discussions based on your event, your organization, your budget, goals, strategy. There's no one-size-fits-all answer that can be given on a webinar. And I want to caution you, if you're listening to another webinar and they say this is the platform you should use, be very wary of who's paying for that sponsorship. All right, so moving on. There we go. Today's goal, we're going to demystify taking your events online. We're going to try to share as much knowledge as we can with you and answer as many questions as we can. Just like we talked about before, with no one size fits all, if you need another way to think about that, ask who a good keynote speaker you should hire is, or which hotel in California you should hold your meeting at, right? We know a lot, but we don't know anything about your meeting. So we don't want to give information that you're not going to be able to take away and use today. So just try to think of this as going to be very basic, general, and you're going to be able to take this framework we're going to give you and adapt it to your meeting and answer the questions we're going to ask you and take the next step forward in planning your virtual event.
So what are we going to cover today? Again, we asked when you were registering what you wanted to get out of this session, and we could fill hours and hours with that content, but we tried to address what most of you said, which is how to get started, best practices, ways to engage your attendees and your sponsors, and also provide a couple real-world examples of events that were face-to-face that have gone virtual. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. And somehow we think we're going to fit this all into an hour. So to start, we want to talk about determining your goals. And one of the messages that we want you to get out of today's webinar is about order of operations. So like Darryl said earlier, we've seen a lot of posts from people asking what platform to use. And we really feel strongly that that is putting the cart way before the horse. And you can't select a platform that's going to work for your event unless you've gone through a series of other steps. And the first of those is discussing your event goals with your leadership, your stakeholders, your clients, whomever it might be. So think about the goals that you have for your in-person event and begin to think about, are those the same as your goals for a virtual event? What do you and your organization hope to get from a virtual event? And what does your attendee hope to see, or your sponsor, or your speakers, or your stakeholders? And what do they hope to get from a virtual event? And then last but not least, think about the financials. Does your association or organization thrive on the income from your annual meeting that was canceled? And do you need to make a decent amount of revenue? Or can you offer free or reduced pricing for your virtual event just as a goodwill gesture to your members or customers? So these are some really big questions. They are in no way all the questions that you'll need to think about when determining your goals, but we chose these since they're some of the more universal things to get you started.
So after you've kind of identified your goals, you really have to take a step back. And again, before you're picking your platform, think about your audience, all right? What are they really looking for? When they come to your event, are they expecting a very slickly produced event, or are they just there for the data and findings? Is it more scientific and content-based, okay? Think about what your meetings generally look like. Is there one speaker on stage presenting slides that everybody, to everybody else? Do you have theater in the round? Does your audience have to see and hold the latest tech gadgets, food additives, rare comic books, and whatever to make their attendance worthwhile? Also think about right now, at least for the time being, are your attendees essential employees? So I do a lot of work in the medical meetings field. Doctors, nurses, medical practitioners, they are not able to focus on anything right now other than their work. They don't have time even to come to a virtual event. So we have to take that in mind.
Okay, so content. This is obviously a big area, another that we're not going to be able to cover all of on this session, but what we want to start with is think about your event, and remember that in the world of live to virtual, one does not equal one. So just because you have a 4-day event and every day there's 8 hours of educational content, that absolutely does not mean that you should have a 4-day virtual event with 8 hours a day of educational content. You don't want to sit in front of a computer screen for 8 hours for 4 days in a row. Neither does your attendee. So think about how you would want to learn an experience event. Think about what are the major things you want to bring virtual, and what is maybe filler content that you can either bring to on demand or move to next year. And also think about if your event is going to be one day or multiple days. I would really recommend, if it's a multi-day event, not to have more than 4 hours of programming a day. You can stretch that if you're going to have everything in one day, but especially in the world right now where everybody is at home, you have distractions. My kid is napping right now. Darryl's dogs might come bursting into the room. We all have things that are taking our attention away. And we want to make sure we're giving people a valuable reason to sit in front of their computer. Have fun if it's appropriate for your group. So again, think back to your event goals when you're making content decisions, but there's tons of fun things that you can do in a virtual event. Maybe your event was supposed to be in Hawaii and you tell everybody to go take a break before, the general session and go change into their resort casual attire and come back on camera dressed as if they were in Hawaii. Or I know that MPI Potomac recently did a happy hour with a scavenger hunt around your house. You can do an art lesson with a local art teacher. And obviously we recommend getting that sponsored if you have sponsorship as part of your meeting. But there's tons of things that you can do to be fun and engaging while still making your content the highlight of your event.
So let's talk a little bit about virtual formats. Now, I think we've answered some of the questions that'll get us closer to picking the platforms that we need, but we need to think about the format and the content of our meeting. So is this going to be live, or is it going to be on demand, or even better, to provide value for those of you who want to know what to charge? Both, right? Simulated live is also an option. So we have, hopefully, if we can do some form of in-person meeting as we start coming back over the summer and into the fall, we can do some sort of hybrid event. We've got to think about spacing as well at our live events. If we can't contract for more space and have to keep people farther apart, you're not going to fit as many people in the room. That's a hybrid event right there. It speaks to it. Question 2, do you have general sessions, or are you just doing breakouts? Are you even having a meeting, or could it be like this where we're doing a webinar, right? We don't have to have a big fancy platform for this. How is the content presented? So again, are you having one speaker on stage presenting slides, or do you have a round table, or do you have a big ballroom where you throw the cube mics, the box mics around to ask questions? All that's going to play into your format. Is there going to be a trade show or poster hall, or both? So obviously this now raises the complications a little bit, and the challenges, but there's ways to do it. And are there going to be networking events outside of the content sessions themselves? So in other words, do you have that welcome dinner or the welcome reception where everybody gets around and catches up with colleagues they haven't seen over the years, and how do you play that? Also, I want you to think about, do you have any existing resources that you can leverage? So you probably already have a conference website. What if you put all the content, if you have password protection on that website, could you put the content and the links to the different sessions behind that password protected or that paywall? There's an option. Do you have a mobile app? Can you do the same thing there? Is your mobile app password protected, where you can share the links to the different presentations? You can share the handouts and the videos and the other materials. What about an abstract submission system? Might be a way to, if there's a public-facing side, to present your scientific abstracts and posters. What about your AV company? They may have a platform already that you already got a contract with your AV company. Talk to them, switch it around. If they have a platform, maybe you could use their platform. Also think about some of the stuff that's free. So we're presenting today on Zoom, which is free, although this is a paid version. Thank you, Shayna. There is Google. We're using Google Slides to do this. We didn't do anything fancy. And one of the cool things with Google Slides is there's a built-in Q&A feature that will allow your viewers to ask questions, vote them up and down, and your speaker can actually see the questions pop up on their screen, so they can answer it in real time. So there's a lot of options there if you leverage your existing resources.
Okay, so let's start talking about what you want your event to look like. And the first piece of information, advice we have for you is to talk to your organization's marketing team or brand experts. Your virtual event should stay on brand with your organization's standards and with your face-to-face events. So if you have a big, flashy face-to-face event, your attendees are likely going to expect a more full-service virtual platform. If you have a low budget, budget conscious, low production face-to-face event, your attendees are likely going to be totally fine with one of the less robust options, and they're going to expect it. So design a look and feel that both fits your brand and fits what your attendees are used to. Talking about dress, you may be surprised that I do not do my hair and put on a blazer every morning while I've been home for the last 6 weeks. But we dress today as we would if we were face to face with you at a professional meeting. So encourage your speakers to do the same. My parents attended a black tie wedding on Saturday night on Zoom, and my dad wore a tuxedo because it was a black tie wedding, and that's what he would have done if they had gone to the venue and been at the wedding. Think about your set. So right now, obviously, everybody's going to be at home. But if you're planning a virtual event that is scheduled for September or August or, somewhere further down the road, consider if you want your speakers and presenters to be at home like we are, or if you want them to be in a professionally produced studio area for their sessions. Think about lighting. I will tell you that I picked the most optimal place in my house for this session for this time of the day. And if you are also in Montgomery County, Maryland, it's gross outside right now, and there is no light coming in the 5 windows in this room. So a little less ideally lit than I would have planned to be. And then also think about backdrops. So you might want to provide all of your speakers with a logoed backdrop, like a little step and repeat that they can set up themselves so that everybody has the same look and feel, especially if they're part of a panel presentation, regardless of where they are.
All right, let's talk equipment. If you have an existing AV company or other virtual event provider, they are possibly telling you that you need all sorts of high-tech equipment and lights and high microphones and mixers and everything else to do a virtual event. They might be right. Chances are they're wrong. Listen, again, this goes back to what is your audience expecting? You guys are pretty understanding and knew that we just kind of put this together a little bit on the fly. So I have my little headphones that I use on my phone with my little microphone on the side. We have, this really all you need is a microphone, a camera, which most of us have on our laptops. And if you don't have one on your laptop or computer, you got this little thing here, this little HD camera that we all carry in our pockets, right? Put it up on a stand or duct tape it to your computer, however you got to do it, and it could produce a great image. And you need a strong internet signal. Those are the 3 things. We want to discourage you from thinking you can just order a webcam on Amazon, especially right now, or Walmart, or wherever. They are in very short supply because, of course, everybody's teleworking. And in terms of a microphone, as you can hear, this sounds pretty good. When I do my podcast, I do have a microphone. It's called a Yeti, and it's about $150, but it's not all that expensive. It does produce a better sound. In terms of lighting, as Shayna noted, ideally you can have windows, or if you have some lamps, you bring them a little bit closer to your screen to help separate yourself from the background behind you. And if you really want to get fancy, on Amazon, some things you can get are a little selfie lighting ring. It's called selfie lighting ring. Costs about $30 or $50, and it can just sit up on a stand right behind your camera, and again, just helps give you a little bit of soft light on your face to separate you. But the point here is the KISS method, right? Keep it simple. Shayna.
Thank you. I'm not going to make any assessments about what you just called me. So platform. as Darryl said before, we cannot tell you what platform to use on this webinar because we are not intimately familiar with your goals, your need, and your budget. And you may just be starting out, so you may not have gone through those steps about your goals and thinking about your attendees yet. But what we really want you to take away from this is that there are tons of platforms out there. They all have different features, different price points, and different options. You know, you likely will have to go through some demos or sales calls to get to the pricing, which we all admit is a little bit annoying, but at the same time, you want to sit through those because the same way that you wouldn't just get one price quote for AV and sign your contract, you want to get more than one bid and to, you know, really compare apples to apples when it comes to virtual platforms. And what we recommend is that you go through these steps, you know your goals, you know your content and the format of your event before you approach the virtual meeting and event providers platforms. You need a list of what you really need and what you'd like in your event. And you need to know all that up front in order to get the best pricing. Otherwise, you might end up down the road realizing, oh, I actually need one more track, and they can upcharge you for adding on once you've already executed a contract. And then the other thing to think about is if you were having a face-to-face event, you would probably go out and do a site visit before you contract that hotel or that convention center or that city. So do the same thing for a virtual event. Ask the platform that you're considering to let you attend an upcoming event that they have with another client, and or talk to your colleagues and see, you know, if you can sit in on their upcoming event, and really try out the platform before you do any contracting with them.
So let's talk about the technical considerations behind a platform choice. You have your user experience, and we talk about this a lot. You have to look at this from the perspective of your user, of your attendee. Especially if you're using you decide to use multiple platforms. Maybe you have one for the sessions and another for the networking and a third for the exhibit hall. You've got to test the way a day in the life of an attendee would look. So this is a great opportunity to get a friend or a family member to walk through the front door, in quotes, the front door of your meeting, and can they get into a session? Can they ask a question? Can they hear the speaker? We want it, so these are all things that we're really going to think about. Do your participants have firewalls? Some of them can't use Zoom. Some can't install software or applets onto their computer. So you need to, again, go back to know your audience to know to have an idea of the technical considerations you'll need behind your platform. And in terms of what to ask your platform provider, these are the questions, right? You know, is there a download required? You know, is this something that could be blocked potentially by a system? The platform should be accessible: PC, Macintosh computer, Android, iPhone. I have some platforms I know I get every once in a while. Somebody comes up to me like with a mobile conference app and they ask, well, why can't I get this on my Kindle Fire? One person wanted to know why they couldn't get it on their first generation Kindle, and that's a whole nother explanation. But make sure whatever platform you get, it is not specific to a specific operating system. Ideally, web-based is the best because it's accessible to everybody. So we already talked about the user downloading software. Can the users also test their system in advance, or is it only a day of situation? Some webinars you'll attend for these trainings, you'll see that it'll give you the opportunity to test your system before the day even comes. So you want to check your internet connection, your camera, your microphone, your speakers. These are all good, even your bandwidth. Also, think about tech support. So the platform probably offers some form of tech support, but do they offer it during the hours of your meeting? I want to flash back to Global Meetings Industry Day last week, and they started at 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. I had a little problem connecting, so I called the tech support number on the email, which I won't say the platform. I got a voicemail, and then the voicemail said, sorry, our mailbox is full. That's not the way to start a day at 7 o'clock in the morning. So make sure either the platform can offer tech support, but also make sure your staff, you've got a couple staff members trained and the basics, the real low-level FAQs of the platform that they can help your attendees as well.
Okay, so cost, expenses, revenue, that's something that's high on everybody's list. It was real popular in the registration survey in terms of things that people wanted to take away. And we could do an entire webinar just on this slide alone. So this is definitely high level, not a deep dive. You could feel free to ask questions that you have, or let us know if you want to talk about this slide more later. But to start with, costs. So virtual events can be very expensive, but they don't have to break the bank. So think back to your event goals and what your attendees are going to expect to see. And think about, do you need something to be professionally produced? Do you need flash? And don't buy services and a platform that offers things you don't need. For the same reason, that's why we don't think you should just use the platform that your best friend in the industry uses because you trust them and you know it's a good platform. It may not be the right one for you in terms of the cost and the accessories that come with it. Also think about what you're saving by not having a face-to-face event. And in many cases, the costs of these platforms are going to end up being less than what you're saving by not having food and beverage and hotels and print materials and signage and travel and all these other expenses that go away when you don't have a face-to-face event. Thinking about registration fees. We want to bring your attention to 2 points when it comes to the reg fee. Number one, in a usual event, attendees have a lot of expenses in addition to the registration fee. They probably have to get on an airplane, they need to spend a few nights in a hotel, there's probably meals that aren't included in the reg fee that they have to cover on their own. For a virtual event, the only expense is their time and the registration fee. So you may actually be able to attract more people to your event because they don't need to travel. There aren't these other expenses. And then the second piece is, if you are an organization that in your post-meeting survey, you are constantly reading complaints that people had to pick between your 4 or your 8 concurrent sessions and they're frustrated because they can't attend more of the sessions, great. You just drastically increased the value of your event by making it virtual if you record everything and put it on demand. So your attendees now can attend every session that they want to attend by being able to watch back the on-demand content. So I guess our message here is, we definitely think you can charge a registration fee for a virtual event. Maybe the fee is the same, maybe it's less. That goes back to your goals and also to your revenue goals. But definitely there is a huge value in the content that you're offering to your attendees. In terms of sponsorship and exhibits, obviously the opportunities vary by platform. There's some more robust platforms where you can have exhibit or sponsored booths set up that people can visit. You can have signage in your virtual lobby. You can have ads playing. But even in the most simple of platforms, take Zoom. In the most simple of platforms, you can have a slide in your deck before the session starts, or you can have a sponsor introduce the speaker, or you can have a sponsored virtual yoga session or virtual happy hour. Darryl, if you'll shut your camera off for a minute, you can have a virtual ad that's posted. So if he shuts his camera off, if you're looking at your screen, you see his company, Big White Dog Events. So if you have a sponsor, you can sell a spot in your grid that's just their advertising and their logo. And then also think about the value that sponsors are getting. So obviously this is a very different environment than what they're used to, but there are some new and increased values for sponsors and exhibitors as part of your virtual event. Number one, if you have an environment, which most do, that has on-demand or post live event content and people can return to the online environment, your sponsors will continue to get exposure for months. If they had a banner ad in the lobby, every time someone comes into the lobby for months when they're going back to that environment, they will see that ad. Number two, nobody can attend a virtual exhibit or sponsor booth anonymously. So from a data perspective, it's a fantastic enhancement for your sponsors and your exhibitors. And last, nobody's going to spend their time visiting a virtual exhibit or sponsor booth if they're not actually interested in what that company is offering. So even if they see less traffic, they are going to see better leads that come from the experiences in a virtual trade show.
And I just want to add to that quickly, with that, not only are you getting better leads and the people want to talk, there's no snatch and grab like you have at a traditional trade show where people are just grabbing the swag or getting their passport stamped and getting off to the next booth. These are meaningful conversations that you're having with that your attendees are having with your exhibitors. So look everywhere for inspiration. Shayna just mentioned this, having a little ad somewhere in your grid before. But the MLB network, Major League Baseball, their TV network, they're doing their shows from home like a lot of places. And Toro Lawnmowers was sponsoring a session. So what do? Right in the grid where you've got four announcers talking from home and a picture of, oh God, Chase Utley and the Phillies. I'm a Mets fan. I'm sorry. That just hurts. But you do have the ad for Toro Lawnmowers right there. And I know that some of you can't do that. There is some continuing education rules around that, and that's okay. But for other people, this could be a great solution, and it works right into the flow of the content.
So now we're going to get into best practices. And I'm going to start with best practices for speakers, and we're going to go through best practices for many different areas of your event. And there was a question a little bit earlier in the chat, and we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can at the end, but about what to ask to the virtual platform providers that you're looking at. And I'd say many of the things we're talking through, Darryl's slide about, different components and offerings and tech support, but also many of the best practices that we're going to mention all turn into questions, or many of them turn into questions about the capabilities of your system. But again, we'll come back to that question more at the end. So speakers, test at nauseum. If you have the bandwidth, we recommend you test with each speaker, presenter, or panel on their own. And if you don't have the bandwidth, we recommend that you have each speaker record themselves and watch the recording back so that they can really see what the attendees will be seeing. They can see the lighting, they can see, is there anything in the background that's offensive or distracting? So you want to make sure that there's nothing in the background, political or polarizing or distracting. So I was on a webinar last week, and one of the presenters, there was a TV on in the background. Some of you may have been on that as well. And it wasn't right behind him, but it was about 15 feet behind him. And there was just images flashing the whole time. And it was super distracting for me every time he came on screen. Make sure that your speakers are testing where and when they are going to be actually executing their event. So if we're talking about, a few months from now, if you've decided that your speakers should be at home, make sure that they are testing from home and executing from home, not from their local Starbucks or other coffee shop where the internet isn't great. And you want to make sure that they're testing where they're going to be doing the final event. Lighting from the front, not from the back. And tell your speakers to test their jokes out in advance. I was laughing to myself at watching the Saturday Night Live from home a couple weeks ago. One of the actors actually was discussing how awkward it is to tell jokes in a room alone and not know if people think it's funny. So he had his family off camera, but behind the camera, so he could hear if he was getting laughs while telling his jokes on Saturday Night Live. And then the same as you would during a live event, have a green room or a speaker ready room where speakers go and check in before it's time for them to get on stage. You moving into the staffing part of the conversation, you need to have speaker wranglers. You need to have people there who are greeting them in the speaker ready room, making sure that their equipment works, making sure that they don't have any questions, and also getting on the phone with them if they haven't logged in 10 or 15 minutes before their session, and making sure they aren't having any technical issues. And in terms of staffing, that needs to be somebody totally different than all the other types of people I'm going to mention. You need tech support, whether that comes from the platform or it's parts of your staff. You need someone in the chat, monitoring the chats, making sure there's nothing inappropriate, taking the Q&A. Rebecca's doing a great job collecting all the questions to ask at the end, so that we don't have to be trying to read the questions at the same time. Moderators, voice of God, have somebody like Darryl was the voice at the beginning, welcoming all of you, and Rebecca was in the chat welcoming all of you. If you have a larger event, you likely want that to be somebody totally different and not one of your speakers. And make sure that everybody who's assisting with your event is comfortable with the platform, knows some basic answers to frequently asked questions that might come in. And also for each room that you have, as in each session you have going in at the same time, you should have different staff. Nobody should be trying to man multiple rooms at a time. And they should also have an offline way to communicate with each other if they don't know the answer or if they're having problems themselves. And I'm talking about a lot of people right now. So the other message we want to give you is this is not just your meeting staff. Engage with others in your organization. It can be anybody that is assisting with executing your event. If you have content experts at your organization that maybe are like, what's my role in this? They can be moderating the Q&A. If your CEO wants to get in with everybody, they can be the MC or they can be the speaker wrangler, but you can engage everyone in your organization to help with all of these pieces.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that attendee experience. It should be perfectly smooth from the moment they log in until the moment they log off. And it's got to be double and triple checked. This is no different than the 4,000 walkthroughs that we do on site at a meeting, whether it's the night before, or if you're like me, you're on the floor at 5 a.m., double and triple checking things and picking up every little scrap of paper, because it's got to be perfect when your attendees walk in. Just because you're virtual, it doesn't change. Whenever possible, please share the presentations, the handouts, the videos ahead of time. If your audience is used to having a printed book, that is a must, that you've got to share it ahead of time with them. Mobile apps can help with this. If not, you can again put it on your conference website. There are some groups that want to hold the material back a little bit. Not a good time to do that in a virtual environment. Get it to them as soon as possible so that they can take notes and follow along with you. It's really a best practice. Think about your code of conduct. You have it at meetings, okay? You should have it online. Make sure in rooms, especially rooms like this that are large, everybody's mic should be muted. We should be dressed appropriately. So the speakers today, we all have our nice jackets and dresses on. Rebecca and I both have makeup. Shayna does too, but Rebecca and I have the same makeup, which is kind of cool. But you know, it's everybody. It's not just the people who are speaking. If your attendees are there, have them, remind them that this is a professional meeting, that they should dress appropriately. Or if they're in Hawaii, they should be wearing the Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops with like a glove over their a plastic glove over their foot to protect them. Also think about lewd and inappropriate comments in the chat box. They shouldn't be tolerated. They wouldn't be tolerated in person. They shouldn't be tolerated online. Make sure that their penalties are clear and that they are adhered to. Do not be afraid to kick somebody out of a meeting if they're not behaving nicely, okay? Think about how you're gonna handle on-demand content. Are you gonna archive it and post the sessions to YouTube? Or are they going on your own website? Or are they going on YouTube with a private, no searchability and then embedded into your website? Are they going on your LMS? What are you doing and how quickly are they gonna be made available? Shayna touched on it briefly. You have those attendees who complain that they can only attend one of the 8 concurrent sessions at your meeting. So this is a great way to, you're already paying to record it, right? So why not just archive it and put it up in near real time, or maybe an hour after the event ends, so that I can go back, or the session ends, I can go back on my free time and watch sessions 3 and 5 that I couldn't get to myself because I was in session 1. Touched on this briefly about CME and continuing education. There are a lot of restrictions around this, okay? We understand it, trust me. I know this better than a lot of people. You can't have an advertisement for a drug company on the screen when your speaker is presenting. That's a no-no. However, check with your accrediting body. They could be the ones to give you guidance. Some of them may be relaxing their rules just a little bit, understanding that we have to go to the switch to virtual, and we have to pay for it somehow. So again, check with your accrediting body. Also, in terms of tracking who's in the meeting and who's not in the meeting or in the session, a lot of platforms will allow you to track not only who's attending the session, but how long they're stayed in the session, when they got there, when they left. Some will even allow you to track their attention span. So if the webinar, the virtual platform is the live window on their screen, they're attentive. If their email is up and they're checking their email, even if the webinar is up and they could hear it and see it, that's not attentive. So that make a difference. You can also send an evaluation out right after the session, and that will allow you to capture names and people who want certification. And then you can either, if you do the certificate yourself, great. Otherwise, if you send it off to a third party to do, you can send them that list. So these are just ways that we can track who's really there without a physical sign-in sheet or a badge scan in person. Let's also just talk quickly about the exhibitor and the sponsor experience. If you promise something to your sponsors or exhibitors, you had better deliver on it. This is no different than an in-person meeting, okay? If you promise that they are going to have their ad played during the opening general session, they better have their ad played. And this is why you, Shayna alluded to earlier, you test, and practice. If you don't already share your attendee lists and contact info with your exhibitors and your sponsors, or maybe you only share names and locations, think about maybe adding an email or a phone number. If you have attendees coming over from overseas, there may be some GDIP considerations, but you can, a lot of cases, you can use an opt-out or an opt-in button when the attendee is registering. Giving some more information to your exhibitors and sponsors makes it more valuable for them and makes them consider your rates, worthwhile. And then lastly, some meetings block exhibitors or sponsors from coming into certain sessions. We understand there may be sensitive material talked about, or you want to talk about things the way planners talk about things here in this Facebook group, without the peering eyes of industry. But wherever possible, let them into the virtual sessions. It doesn't cost you anything. They're not taking up a seat, right? Because it's pretty much unlimited space on most of these platforms. And it's a good best practice. It'll keep them happy, and we'll let them know that you value the relationship.
One point I just want to add about CME, since it is so important for many meetings, is if you've never had a virtual event before, make sure you're also talking to your CME provider about the differences between live events and on-demand events, which they likely call enduring events. So you may have to change the type of application that you're doing or the type of fees that you're paying if you have on-demand content versus live content. So make sure that that's part of your planning process, so you don't get stuck at the end not being able to provide CME credit if someone watched videos back on demand. The last thing about best practices that we want to talk about today is event design. And I'm not going to read you the whole slide, but just to touch on a few of these points. Be mindful of time zones. So where are your attendees? And if they're worldwide, think about if it makes sense to have a live virtual event, or if there's no waking hour when everybody could be part of your event. And then assuming that they fit a smaller geographic area, maybe they're just across the United States and Canada, think about what time zone to host your event in. And do you want to host it where in the time zone where your event was scheduled or where your company is headquartered, or maybe just the time zone that's going to fall in the middle of where everybody lives. Think of accessibility the same way that you, I hope, would be mindful of accessibility when planning your face-to-face event. You need to consider several things, but just for example, does the platform offer closed captioning? Is text on the platform recognizable by e-readers? And just make sure that your virtual events are as accessible as your face-to-face events would be. Do not assume that every session can convert to virtual or that every speaker is going to be comfortable going to virtual, and that is okay. There are some sessions, if something is heavy on touching and feeling or experiencing, where you're not going to be able to be virtual. And if you have a speaker that says, I just don't want to be on camera, I'm not comfortable with it, they're likely not going to deliver a great session if you force them into it. So you may find a way to cut back on some of your content hours, some of, what we said fluff before, but some of your sessions may just not convert. And then lastly, engage your attendees every 5 to 10 minutes. We know we're not doing a great job of that today, but think about every 5 to 10 minutes, take a break to do a poll or take a question from the Q&A, play a video. Engaging doesn't have to mean something your attendees do, but it's just something to change what you're doing. I guess in our case, we keep switching back between Darryl and I. So that's how we're, kind of bouncing back and forth. But it could be show a picture, show a video, have them go get something from their homes to display, go into a breakout room. The possibilities are really endless. So we want to spend a few minutes now sharing a couple real world examples, and I want to welcome Stacia Garigian, who is the Associate Vice President of Events for the National Association of Landscape Professionals. And Stacia is going to share some information about her organization's event that went virtual earlier this month.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for that kind introduction, Shayna, and thank you to Darryl, Shayna, and Rebecca for putting this all together. I have to say that I wish I had known all of this about a month ago. I started with NALP right before COVID-19 hit on February 24th, so great introduction after 19 years with the Association of American Medical Colleges to start fresh. The goal for NALP, when we decided to go virtual, what happened was we had a National Collegiate Landscape competition that was scheduled to take place April 18th through 21st at Michigan State University. We were holding out hope that we were ahead of the curve. That's a 3-day annual competition, a lot of networking for students that are enrolled in the horticulture programs across the country. It's about 900 students that attend that event. The in-person event is comprised of a career fair, career development workshops, competitive events, and student workshops. And what we were trying to do when we realized that this was no longer going to happen was providing students and faculty the opportunity to still interact with industry through a career fair, providing education and workshops. And then what we really wanted to do is try and retain as much sponsorship and career fair revenue as possible. So we canceled our in-person event on March 11th. I had heard about a company called Six Connects through my former organization, AAMC. They had used this platform for multiple career fairs. So I reached out to them on the 10th to get some more information and a contact person. And then we signed the contract with Six Connect on March 17th. So I ultimately did not do anything that you all have told us to do here. We basically went with what we knew. We signed the contract and then we started building it. What we did in regard to communication, we updated our websites. We posted a whole lot of posts on LinkedIn and Facebook. We emailed department heads at the universities across the country, and we ended up registering everyone that was originally registered for the competition for this virtual event. Again, how do we select our platform? We just went with what we knew. We did a demo with 6Connect, and then we were building it the next week. But what this did was this platform enabled students to still go in and chat with industry reps in the booth. We did not do any live education or workshops. We just did not have the time to be able to do it, and we couldn't get the presenters to be able to put something together in that amount of time. And it was very important to the students to be able to have this prior to about mid-April. So we were really working under very condensed timeline. So we went live with our event April 7th and 8th. We did 1 to 4 p.m. each day. That was so that people on the West Coast and East Coast had good access to the event. And our site is now on demand until June 30th. So it features 40 career fair booths. Originally at the in-person event, we had about 120. So we lost quite a bit of the booth revenue. We had a dozen pre-recorded educational sessions. We did a sponsor showcase where we had our platinum, gold, and silver and bronze sponsorships ideally placed. And then we filled some other rooms with information on our organization, information on membership, and joining our organization. Tips that I have: plan ahead as much as we could have never predicted what has happened. But again, we condensed what should have been 6 to 8 weeks into 3 weeks, which is probably why I have these horrible circles around my eyes, because that equated to about 12 to 15 hours work days for about 3 people working full time on this event. We had to drop everything. So everything else has really been put on hold in regard to a lot of our other projects. I would recommend marketing as much as you possibly can. You have to make it hard for them not to come. We ended up refunding all of the students and faculty with their original fees so that they did not have to pay for anything to come. Communicate early and often with those that will provide you with content to upload into the platform. They need a lot of hand-holding, so you're going to have to be doing a lot of touch points with those people. And thank your sponsors for being willing to take the risk with you. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Stacia. I also want to share an example today of one of the clients that Part 2 Events has brought into the digital space, just because it's a different type of event than the one that Stacia was able to share with us today. So for about 4 years, Part 2 Events has been working with Lancome on all of their face-to-face trainings. We do about 100 trainings a year with them. And we knew immediately that we'd need to help them bring those into a virtual space because they're part of the onboarding process for new team members. So it's not really something you can just ignore when it's onboarding. For them, the right solution was part on demand, part live. So Darryl spoke earlier about utilizing your existing resources. So for them, the on-demand part of their trainings is on their existing learning management system. So they didn't need a new platform for that. Their live event takes place after people have completed all of the on-demand content trainings, and they're hosting them 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 1 hour each day. And every day it is a different trainer and different content. And Lancome worked internally to determine what their goals were of the event. And then they worked with Part 2 Events to really design how they would accomplish those goals and what would be the right platform for those goals. So for Lancome, they are really focused on trying to create a school or classroom type environment. So we together selected the Adobe Connect platform, which is not one that you may have looked at because one of the benefits is the virtual classroom. And you can return every day to the same chat, the same notes that you would have day after day for their 4-day long school that they are creating. And then we also determined that having a produced event would not be right for them because they are offering these trainings Monday through Thursday every other week through July. So that's a lot of production time and a lot of cost in the fact that they have to be live each time because it's a different group of students interacting. So even though they didn't want a produced event, they still wanted to make sure that they were setting their trainers up for success. So we put together a care package of much of the equipment that Darryl was talking about earlier, with a mic and a ring light and a good webcam. Again, just to make sure that they had everything they needed in their homes. And we also did create and mail out to them a backdrop with their branding on it and a YouTube video that would teach them all how to set it up in their homes, so that each day, even though the trainers are all around the country, there would be the same look and feel in the classroom and then as well in the trainer environment. And the biggest tip I would give you from working with Lancome to bring their trainings digital is to know all of your event needs before you select a platform. Again, Adobe Connect is not a platform that's probably high on your list. It wouldn't have been high on mine either if they weren't looking for that classroom environment. And if they hadn't designed and figured out what they were going to do and figured out that they wanted part of their content to be on demand and part to be live, we wouldn't have known that that was the best platform for them.
Well, those are great stories. So thank you to both of you for sharing them. Although, Shayna, I will say, if you keep bad-mouthing Adobe, they're not going to give us the millions of dollars they promised us for running this webinar. But it's a good point. Listen, the end result here for everybody, just like we do in real life in-person events, we manage the chaos, right? The whole world is catching fire around us, but our attendees, our speakers, our exhibitors never know that because we put those fires out. We manage the chaos. Here's some key takeaways. Going virtual isn't easy. Doesn't have to be difficult, though. If you set your goals, leverage existing technology, and set expectations. Just like in your event, you have plans A through B through C, all the way on through down to those Russian letters that I can't pronounce, okay? Same thing in virtual. Practice, test, practice, test. Keep on practicing as much as possible. Try to keep it simple. Technology doesn't have to overwhelm you. You can make it as fancy as you want. But again, a headset, a laptop with a camera, and an internet connection is all you need. Excellent customer service. Ultimately, this means the attendees have to have a seamless experience from the time they log in till the time they log out. One platform is not right for all. Don't do it yourself. And just like Rebecca's doing such an awesome job today, monitor and respond to the chats. I know we are right up against our 1 hour time limit, but we are going to hang around here, answer questions that you have. If you want to hang on with us, we'd love to chat. If you don't, go ahead and log off, get a drink or other non-alcoholic beverage, if you will, and we will answer questions. Our contact information is on the screen there. We can answer questions via email for as long as you have them. And also, if you guys are up on the Facebook group, send us a message that way too. So we're going to toss it over to Rebecca. What do we got?
Well, first I want to throw out to say thank you to Shayna and Darryl. When I posted this question, on Facebook, I, like pretty much everybody else, is, oh my goodness, we have to go virtual. What do I need to do? And of course, all the webinars I'm taking are those in a studio and it just, nope, I just need a planner to tell me, like, lay it all out. How should I be thinking? So thank to both of you for putting this together, and for everybody who actually also followed the same question I had and really thought this was going to be a need. Shayna, you touched up on a question that was asked earlier on, but even just to go back to it for platform providers, while we're looking for a platform provider, what would be there some extra questions that we should be asking, something that we would not maybe even necessarily to ask our regular AV provider?
Yeah, as I touched on before, a lot of the things that we posed here would be things to ask. I also have been asking a lot of providers that I'm looking at for clients what sets them apart and what makes them different. I also think that especially in the current time, it is really important to be asking the providers what their bandwidth is like and how many new clients they're taking on, because I think some of the platforms are getting spread too thin. And like Darryl's experience last week, I was on that same webinar. I have looked at that platform and used that platform and know they're amazing, but I wonder if they're just spread a little too thin, and that's why the voicemail box was full. So make sure that you're asking that as well. Darryl, anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I saw the question pop up, and I had to reach over and get my pad because this is how I think. Make sure to ask how many seats, how many admin roles, and you can get, and not just the main super user admin, but are there various stages, various levels below that, so that staff members or volunteers, board members, whomever, committee members within your organization and within your meeting can fill some of those roles. So maybe you can have somebody who could do tech support, who could just look at account information for each user. If it's a moderator, right, they've got to be able to mute lines. And so do they have that access? I mean, not every program is built the same way. The other thing, we brought up this virtual green room, and there were a few of you who came in a little early today, and Shayna and Rebecca and I were talking, right? Because Zoom, well, they have a waiting room, but then it gets complicated when you have hundreds of people coming to admit them all. But the basics of Zoom is there's no green room. There's nothing private. So there are platforms out there that allow for that. So make sure you're asking about that. And lastly, I would ask a little question about somebody asked, where this webinar is going to be found. And I think we're going to put it up on probably put it up on YouTube and then link it over to the Facebook group. But think about, does the platform allow for archival video? And if so, how do people get to it? Is it complicated? Again, do they need the plugins? Can I view it from my phone? Think about it the way you'd think about a lot of different software. And you're not going to be able to ask every question. You're not going to remember every question. But again, that's why unless you're in a very unique situation, like the landscape architects, try to take your time and think through the process. So after that initial sales call, you may have some follow-up questions, or your executive board may give you some questions you don't know how to answer. And that's where you follow up with them. So just try to keep as much time as possible before you have to select that platform.
So on, I guess to follow up with another question that came a little later, I feel like it's also part of the platform provider, and ideas on how to prevent a paying attendee or an attendee to share their link screen with others while you're even in presentation.
Right. So, look, for those of you who have a policy that everybody's got to have a badge when they walk into your event room, but in reality, that a grand ballroom has 6 different entrances and you can't really police that as well as you'd like, think of it a little bit like that. You want to keep things password protected where you can. You want to allow only one login per account. You don't want something like that can be shared. But ultimately, if I take my phone and I'm broadcasting, I'm holding it up here while you're talking and it's broadcasting out to the world, it's broadcasting out to the world. I don't think anybody's going into this nefariously and saying, I don't have to pay for 10 registrations. I'm going to just pay for mine and I'm going to broadcast it out to everybody. I think for the most part, we got to go with a certain amount of trust and professionalism.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a little bit ethics. So I know this question or a similar question had come up in the Meeting Planner Facebook group, and I had commented on that you should put an ethical clause as part of your registration process. Again, no way to police it, but you can revoke someone's rights if they share the link. And also, you, as Darryl said, use a platform that only allows the link to be used once at one time. If you put in your email and you're the one who paid for it, somebody else cannot put in their email and log in at the same time. I also, just in case people aren't following the chat, want to comment that Sherry added a great question for platforms that you're looking at, which is to ask how many people they had on staff full-time versus contracted, and how many in February versus now. So that's another great way to tell how their bandwidth is. So thank you, Sherry.
Well, thank you for adding that, because I was putting that on my list. So, and then actually there was just one other question, but more under like the event not event content, but like how to make it enjoyable more for the attendees. And there seems to be a lot of chatter lately about doing virtual meal functions, or virtual lunch, not just coffee breaks. So thoughts, ideas, have you heard or seen anything following those?
Shayna?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can go in many directions, and in part it depends on what your event goals are. Again, I personally don't like the idea that I've seen out there of like having Uber Eats or something like that delivering to everyone, because you have no idea what people's dietary restrictions or allergies, and you also, in this current climate, have no idea what people's comfort level is with food coming into their home and what restaurants they are or are not comfortable with getting food from. So I just right now don't love that idea because of where we are. I do love an idea that I heard recently of a gala that's taking place. You know, we're very thinking about meetings, but think about fundraisers, galas, other things where the meal is really important. And work, if it's a local event, you know, if everybody's in DC or everybody's in New York that's going to be attending your event, work with a local caterer to create a menu, and let your attendees know that for one night only, they can order that gala dinner, 3-course dinner with wine, if your state allows it, from the caterer. If you can get it sponsored, even better. So people know that if they'd like to do it, it's you know, taken care of. But if you can't, you can still make it available to people that they can call that caterer and get their gala meal catered for them to be part of the evening.
Absolutely, and I would add to that. There's I saw one that's a coffee break, and somebody they wanted to get it sponsored, and they sent out Starbucks gift cards. And again, it's like the Grubhub. You're not going to use it right away, but it's just something nice that says, okay, you know, I'm probably still at my house. I probably have my coffee from downstairs this morning, but it's just a nice sentiment to say that if you were in person, we would give you a free cup of coffee. Although I think a $5 Starbucks gift card doesn't always pay the same price that we pay for a cup of coffee, plus. But, you know, it's these nice gestures that let people know that it's not just the meeting. It's not just the you know, the session content. What are we doing? And Shane, I think that's a great point about galas and thinking about events outside of outside of an annual or semi-annual meeting. You know, what does that different event look like? We can't get out and do a golf tournament, right? Okay, fine, we get that. But, you know, maybe we can play a golf video game online or something like that, and we all compete with the high scores. So you got to be a little creative about it. Obviously, we're not saying it's easy. It does make us challenge us a little bit, but how can we make this a more memorable experience, more valuable experience for our attendees, our sponsors, and our exhibitors?
And Darryl, I want to say thank you for mentioning that part too, but I will also say, as you said, remember your attendees. I did just mention to my boss this morning, since we have sponsors for a coffee break, and, you know, even sending them a gift card. And then she reminded me, since all of our members are farmers in the middle of the Midwest, some of them live 3 hours away from the nearest Starbucks.
Fair enough.
So that just might not be possible. But I don't see any more questions in the chat box, if anyone has any more. But I say thank you again for putting this together and for everybody to have such a great response. It's really
We
Yeah.
appreciate everybody's time. We know maybe this was a great break from your day, but for us, we really enjoyed putting this presentation together for you. As Darryl said, we'll be posting a link to the recording, and we are available, if you need anything. But one of the biggest things that I have seen over the last 6 or 8 weeks is how much our industry has been there for each other. So go to your colleagues and ask them for help, or ask them the questions you have. Post them on Facebook or LinkedIn. And, it's an unprecedented time. And I really think everybody's coming together to help each other get through this.
Absolutely. And thank you, Rebecca, for kind of planting the seed and see Grain Council seed. See what I did there? Thank you for planting the seed. And it works for the landscapers too. Thanks for planting the seed and getting us moving. And I think that, at least for me, I can speak for me, and I think for Shayna too, we really enjoy sharing our knowledge with everybody. This is hard. This is something that we're not really trained for per se, but we have the skills. You all have the skills to be able to pull off virtual events. You just have to know and have confidence that you can do it. And then hopefully this will provide a good framework for pushing you in that direction.
Agreed. Well, have a great rest of your day, everybody, and stay safe. Bye.